Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Again, good morning, gentlemen. We use this time to introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Howard.
Paul.
Cass.
Snake. George.
Jim.
Nicholas. Kay. Helen.
Carl. Marty.
David.
Richard.
Will. Greg. Bob.
Steve. Bill. Jim.
Paul.
David.
Paul. Peter.
Kevin. Bob.
Eric.
It's a delight to be together. Anyone here for the first time? Welcome you especially, and also direct you to our host today. There. Right there. And he will be glad to introduce you to the Sangha and the details of the work here. It's my privilege to introduce Jim Wilson, the former Abbot of the Chogye Zen Center in New York. He has studied in the Chogye, the Fuki, and the Soto traditions of Zen. And in addition to speaking at the Gay Buddhist Fellowship on the first Sunday of each month, he leads 2 weekly Sutra Salons in the Bay Area. Jim, I know that recently the Sangha got together to do an evaluation of this work. The man who had made very valuable contributions to the life of the Sangha, and your name certainly surfaced as one of the great gifts of this Sangha.
Neat. Thank you.
Good morning.
I need some overhead lighting for my mature eyes. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming this morning. I want to say quickly, because I keep forgetting, about the Sutra Salons. And that is since about 8 or 10 months, I have been unable to lead the Sutra Salons in San Francisco and Oakland. And they're still ongoing, but I just wanted to put out that I'm not the one that's leading them. But I am starting one in Sebastopol, where I live now. So now you can drive to Sebastopol instead of me driving to... So I just wanted to clarify that, because I've gotten some emails from people who are interested, because I am listed as leading those particular Sutra Salons, and I wanted to make clear that that's not how they're functioning at this time.
Correction noted.
Okay.
But you do lead one in Sebastopol.
Right.
And we can announce that.
Yeah.
It's done.
Okay.
When is that?
The Sebastopol one will begin in June, and it's the 4th Tuesday of the month.
4th Tuesday.
Sutra Salons meet once a month. So, do people have any Dharma questions or comments about practice? Wonderful.
I do.
You do.
It's been itching on me, is the relationship between vows and non-attachment.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Because like the Bodhisattva vows, sentient beings are numberless, a vow to save them all.
Or any vows, the vows of the precepts, or the vows you'll make. A vow seems to me to be inherent with the quality of attachment.
In terms of the precepts, the purpose of the precepts is to provide an insight and a direction into how to interact with other people in a way that is conducive to the awakening of wisdom and compassion. So if you can view the precepts as a tool, then that has a use, then I think that diminishes the sense of attachment to them. The other thing is that for most of us, when we look at the precepts, we bring to the Buddhist precepts what I call a commandment space in our mind, because they resemble the commandments from the monotheistic tradition. Some of them are identical. Commandments in the monotheistic tradition issue forth from a divine source, and are therefore, if you don't live up to them, you're in trouble. But the precepts of Buddhism are guidelines or rules of thumb. The distinction. Let's see. If I make an analogy, it might be clear what I'm getting at. There's, if you look at ethical precepts as rules, there's different kinds of rules. For example, there's the rules of chess. And if you're playing with somebody and you violate the rules of chess, the person you're playing with will say that you've cheated. You're no longer playing chess. If you take the bishop and you move it straight, then people will say either you don't know how to play it or you're trying to get away with something. Ethical principles that issue from a cosmic source, like a deity, or in the sense of Confucianism, a metaphysically cosmic source, tend to have that feel to them. If you don't live up to them, you're not an ethical person. And so there's very little leeway. But there's also what I call rules of thumb, like don't cross the street in the middle of the block. And that's a good rule of thumb. But it's not, if it's 2 a.m. and there's no traffic anywhere, crossing the street in the middle of the block is not something that we would consider, a sin, or something that would, have karmic consequences, or something like that. It's just an option. But that doesn't mean that the rule, don't cross the street in the middle of the block, is a bad rule. It's a good rule, but it's what I call a rule of thumb. So Buddhist precepts are more like that second group than the first group. They are good guidelines, but existence is more complicated and more beautiful than a set of ethical principles can encompass. So situations are going to arise in our life that the precepts simply don't cover or relate to, or the other conundrum is that situations in our life will arise in which to take action will mean violating one or more of the precepts. There's a contradiction built into it. My teacher, Sun Sneem, used to love to put people on the spot at precept ceremonies, regarding this. You're on a ship and the boat is sunk. There's 8 people and there's only room enough for 6. Do you get in the boat? Do you not get in the boat? And if you do get in the boat, then that means you're killing someone else. And if you don't get in the boat, it means you're committing suicide, which is also a violation of the first precept. So there you are. And then he usually did this as you were standing in front of 50 people, about to get your precepts document, you were going, and he'd say, know when to keep the precepts and know when to break them, and the way that works about knowing when to keep them and knowing when to break them, that's not a license to do whatever you want to do. As your practice deepens, your sense of heart wisdom becomes clearer. And you can rely more and more on that sense of compassionate presence. And then it becomes relatively easy to work with the precepts. The metaphor I use for the precepts is that they're good friends. The precepts are good friends. I don't always agree with my good friends, but I consult my good friends. I often ask them for advice. I don't always follow their advice, usually to my regret. But there's that kind of relationship to them. For the Bodhisattva vows, it's interesting about the Bodhisattva vows because from a certain perspective, you could say that the Bodhisattva is infinitely attached. Like sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. It's like attached to the suffering of all sentient beings. So, the way I look at that is that it is the transformation of attachment itself into the path of awakening. So, if you everything which appears can be transformed into the activity of awakening. For example, anger. From the perspective of the path of purification, anger is something that needs to be eliminated from one's mind stream. And there are practices that it is possible to do that. You can do that through the practices that have been developed within that context. From the perspective of transformation, of the path as transformation, how do you use anger for the benefit of other sentient beings? It's not as difficult as it may sound. A really good example that I've mentioned here many times is if you're taking care of a child and they run into the street and you tell them not to, you go through this 6 times. The 6 times you get angry and you send the child to their room. And say, I really mean it. And this is the consequence. You're going to have to go through if you do that. But that is an expression of concern for the child. It's not egoic. It might be a little egoic, this mixture, but it's primarily non-egoic. It's anger for the concern of that sentient being, for the welfare of that sentient being. So it's possible to use anger anger can be an expression of compassion. Attachment can be an expression of compassion. And that's part of the purpose of the Bodhisattva vows. Is when that energy appears, how do you transform that energy so that it is an expression of enlightened activity? And the way you do that is through the internalizing and contemplating of the Bodhisattva vows. The name for this is Bodichitta. This is the arising of Bodichitta in one's consciousness. It is the transformation of the practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. When Bodichitta arises in one's consciousness, practice becomes very smooth, very alive, and it's very, very easy to enter into it. When bodhicitta is not present, it gets a little sticky because it becomes like a personal possession. Like possessiveness becomes an aspect of it. Like it's my practice, my dharma. So bodhicitta dissolves that sense of possessiveness by transforming appearances into the way of saving all sentient beings from suffering. Is that helpful, or does that?
I'm grateful for your reflection.
It might not have been helpful, but he's grateful. Which is what I want to talk about today. So, I thought I'd talk about Bodichitta, and I've hesitated to go into this because it's a long subject, but that's okay. I'll take half a year on this subject. So, I only come once a month. So, and the text I'm going to use as the basis for talking about this is called the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattvas, which is a Tibetan Buddhist text. But I don't consider it like a solely Vajrayana work. It feels to me when I read it that it is a work that is illuminating for all of the Buddhist traditions. It's interesting. I was reading the middle-length discourses, and there's this one discourse where a disciple of the Buddha goes on at length about how wonderful it is that the Buddha was here for the welfare of all beings, for the welfare of deities and humans, for the benefit of all living creatures. It had a very Mahayana feel to it. This was the Pali Canon. You won't find the word bodhicitta in the Pali Canon, but you have to go past the word and look for meaning. So a good example is in the Pali Canon, the word bodhisattva simply means the Buddha in a previous life, as he was striving to become a fully enlightened Buddha. In the Sarvastivada lineages or the Sanskrit-based lineages, the word bodhisattva takes on a very different meaning. So you have to get past that meaning, like when you're reading various works. Or another example is the word arhat. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha refers to himself as an arhat frequently. But in the Sanskrit-based traditions, the word arhat it designates a lesser stage of development than a Buddha. So the word takes on a different meaning, in the two traditions. So you have to tune yourself to the meaning of the words that are being used rather than the labels that are being used. So the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas is it's about 40 verses. There's some introductory verses and some concluding verses, and there's each verse is 4 lines. It's a very, very beautiful text, and it's all about bodhicitta, and the turning of one's consciousness, so that one's practice is transformed into a path of liberation for all sentient beings. So this pivot is, when we first come to practice, when we first enter into practice, most of us, certainly true for me, are concerned with our own distress. And that's why we enter into a spiritual practice, because we're in usually some kind of psychological, spiritual distress, pain, suffering. Sometimes the pain and suffering is from outside. People who experience a great tragedy in their life, for example, might be propelled into a spiritual practice. And so we go to a meditation center, a Buddhist center, might be a Hindu center, yoga, whatever it is, in order to get some sense of peace or a sense of centeredness, in the midst of our life, which seems to be out of control or unrelentingly filled with suffering. And so we want some guidance there, or some method to settle that. And that's a wonderful reason to go into spiritual practice. It's important to understand that I'm not saying that that's wrong or that that's a bad motivation. But what happens is that if people it's kind of like going to a doctor. So you take the medicine, and then when you get well, you don't go back to the doctor. You just go on with your life. So people whose focus on spiritual practice is like that tend to drop out. When whatever was causing the distress is past. They've done the meditation, they've done the practices, it's worked, and they move on. And once again, that's not bad. It's good that there are places that people can go in order to gain release from that kind of distress. Bodhicitta is the arising in one's consciousness that the reason I'm entering into this practice is to benefit others. When that appears, there is a motivation to continue with one's practice. So that's why bodhicitta is considered so important. That's why it's considered so pivotal. At some point, if that doesn't arise, then then the practice will become dull, or you have other things to do, like go to a movie or something like that. But when bodhicitta appears, then now I get it. Now I know why I'm doing this, or why I should continue doing this. So that's the function that it carries. And that shift is the first appearance in one's mind of the way of the bodhisattva. That's the direction. That's the quality of mind. There's a work in the Pali Canon called Buddha Vamsa, which means chronicle of the Buddhas. And it begins 14 million incalculable eons ago. So quite a stenographer. So anyway, when the Buddha Dipamkara was teaching in a world system incredibly far from where we are now, there was a young man by the name of Sumedha who studied under Dipamkara. Dipamkara means light bearer or light bringer. And what arose in Sumedha's consciousness was that he wanted to practice and follow the way of Dipamkara for the benefit of all sentient beings. And that was the moment of the appearance of bodhicitta in the consciousness of the person who would eventually become Shakyamuni, Buddha. So the Chronicle of the Buddhas is the history of all the Buddhas that Shakyamuni studied under, as he, in his cosmic career, that eventually resulted in him becoming Shakyamuni. Whether you believe in this literally or not is not important to me. The significance of this is a Theravada work, but it's a perfect illustration of the importance of bodhicitta. That was the moment, that was the causal reason that Shakyamuni became a Buddha. It took 14 million incalculable eons, but hey, he had time. So the Buddha, once again, the Buddha Vamsa doesn't use the word bodhicitta, but that's a perfect story or example of the meaning of bodhicitta. The first verse of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva says, I pay constant homage through my three doors to my supreme teacher and protector Chen Rezig, who, while seeing all phenomena lack coming and going, makes single-minded effort for the good of all living beings. I'm just going to go through the verses. The first verse is an introductory verse, and it begins with an homage. I pay constant homage through my three doors. The three doors are body, breath, and mind. I find it very significant that it begins with an homage, because an homage is an expression of gratitude. Okay? So you pay homage to that which you feel grateful for, not to that which you are repulsed by. And it is the gratitude is the key. It is the golden door to the cultivation of bodhicitta. So that's why this work, the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva, begins with an expression of gratitude and homage. So it's in a way you could say that the first practice of the Bodhisattva is gratitude. And so that's the opening line. Why do I say gratitude is the golden door and the key? Because it is an expression of heart wisdom. By heart wisdom, I mean the awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. So that awareness is the basis from which bodhicitta can arise. So when you feel grateful for something, you feel connected. There is a relationship between you and that something for which you feel grateful. When gratitude is not present, that is the expression and the sense of that I exist as a separately existing being, an isolated being. And that's why gratitude is the golden door. What's important is to identify in your own consciousness what it means to be a bodhisattva. And that can be difficult because in a sense, Buddhist texts are not very helpful about this. It's like if I read a Mahayana sutra, celestial flowers are, raining down, and beams of light are, from the third eye are illuminating, incalculable realms in the eastern quarter, and then there's 10 directions, so there's 10 long chapters about all the worlds that are being illuminated. And I'm not doing any of that. When I'm giving a talk to you, celestial flowers ain't raining down. I wouldn't mind. And so, is that what I have to do to be a bodhisattva? To be a bodhisattva, do I have to, ascend into the sky and do all these, miraculous deeds? And so, all of those wonderful images, they can serve to inspire, but on the other hand, they can serve to discourage us, because I'm just an ordinary human being here, and the gap seems so great. But if you begin with the understanding of gratitude as the basic expression of the bodhisattva, then that's what being a bodhisattva means. It means being grateful for all sentient beings without exception. When you feel grateful for something, you spontaneously want to do something for that which you feel grateful for. See? So that's why the bodhisattva activity is not strained. It's not a duty or a compulsion. If you begin to understand and appreciate all that has been given to us instead of all that has been done to us, then a sense of, I will give back. I will give back to existence. Some of what has been given me. So the cultivation of gratitude is really, the key. And you can recognize that it spontaneously appears in your own consciousness. When you feel grateful for someone, that doesn't have to be someone. It could be grateful for a book, a movie, a garden. That consciousness is what it means to be a bodhisattva, though. And even if it's, momentary, even if it's just, it fades, because we have other forms of consciousness which intrude. But what's important is to recognize that consciousness. Oh, that's what being a bodhisattva means. Like, it means activity based on that sense of awareness. So, questions or comments on that? Does that make sense? Or?
Question about that. One of the things that's come up for me is I've had a few of those experiences, which for somebody like me is a little jarring, to be honest with you. Gratitude. Gratitude spontaneously arises. It's actually a little like it makes me raise my eyebrows or something.
Uh-huh.
And but it happens, and it's happened a little more frequently in arenas that I would least expect. So it is suggested to me that I look at those places where there's great suffering in my life, and that I look to see if there isn't just a touch of gratitude in that place. I mean, it may be just a whiff, but if there's no gratitude at all for that, then there's just resistance.
Yeah. And we have to acknowledge our own limitations, which means, practicing compassion for ourselves. Like, if gratitude doesn't spontaneously arise, and you go, I do feel gratitude. It doesn't work that way. But through meditation and various practices, depending on your tradition, the mind becomes more spacious, and it's more, and that the kind of experiences you're alluding to begin to spontaneously appear. The interesting thing about suffering is that, in the 12-fold chain of dependent origination, there is a form of that 12-fold chain, which I refer to as the transcendent 12-fold chain of liberation. I'm sorry I don't have it with me, so I can't remember all 12. But the first link is suffering, and it says suffering gives rise to faith. Faith gives rise to joy. Joy gives rise to steadiness of practice. Steadiness of practice gives rise to liberation. I'm condensing it. And so that suffering can be seen actually as the seed for awakening in that context. I'll try and remember to bring this next month, because it's a beautiful discourse. Where the Buddha illustrates. Suffering propels us into our practice because primarily we want to get away from it. But then there's the turning into our consciousness where we can actually feel gratitude for the suffering that we have endured. Not that the suffering was not suffering. That's kind of a new agey approach. But that the suffering was ultimately we can incorporate that into our consciousness and use that energy, without experiencing a sense of victimization, that the universe is singling us out for bad treatment.
That's the question I have. It's that most of my life experience has been around suffering as separation and isolation, and it's only when, and it has something to do with age, that I've gotten to experience and perceive suffering as a way of connection and of deep meaningfulness, that a shift, a transformation.
Right. To me, the mechanism that the Buddha uses frequently to transform suffering into the ground of faith and joy is to recognize the universality of suffering. That's what he teaches people who are stuck on that. The most famous example or well-known example is Kisa Gotami, whose only son died when he was about a year and a half, and she was distraught, be absolutely bereft, and through various mechanisms, he made her aware that there is no one who has not had someone close pass away. And it isn't that he said, notice he didn't say to her, "You're not suffering." really, or that you're, like that this isn't real. What he pointed out to her was the universality of that condition, and then she was able to let go of that and use that experience. I mean, ultimately she became a nun, and a very serious disciple of the Buddha, But when we fail to see the universality of that, that's when we begin to feel isolated, and so that's one of the 5 contemplations that the Buddha recommends for everyone. I will be separated from all that I hold dear. That's a contemplation. I will be separated from all that I hold dear, but there's a second aspect to that. All will be separated from all they hold dear, not just you. So, and becoming aware of that situation, there's a shift in one's mind. It says, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot that. Because, and it's very natural, my own situation is so painful that it's difficult for me to, look at what's happening to other people and what they're going through. So, yeah.
Do you think it's helpful to view suffering as the burning off of your own bad karma, or maybe even taking on the karma of someone else, like Christ?
That's a big question.
You got 10 minutes.
And I have 10 minutes. I can only say that I personally don't look at it that way. I do believe in what in Buddhism is called the transfer of merit. And it's part of my daily practice. Whatever merit I have earned from these contemplations and meditations, this is how I conclude my morning practice. Whatever merit I have earned from these contemplations and meditations, I do hereby freely offer it to all sentient beings. And the reason that it's possible to do that is because there's no such thing as a separately existing being. And so transfer of merit is possible. So I think that would be a mechanism for integrating the kind of things that you're talking about. But to be honest with you, I haven't given it much thought, really. So,
I think it's a view of one part of the tantric tradition, what they call the agora. I'm just familiar writes about that. I found it, really interesting.
okay.
He said Christ is a greater figure than the Buddha because he's the only savior who took on someone else's karma. But then he also emphasized that that's pretty dangerous.
Well,
the Agora tradition is very dangerous too.
You're certainly entitled to your own opinion. And, I'm unwilling in this talk to do a Christ versus Buddha sort of comparison at this time.
Bookstore over here.
Yeah, but I mean, I definitely have my own opinion. I'm a committed Buddhist, but it doesn't seem to me fruitful, in this context to go in that direction.
Could you give a talk on karma sometime?
Sure. Don't forget to remind me. I'll forget. Because my mind is so spacious through years and years of meditation that ideas just evaporate and vanish, and this is so. Thank you. But to continue, so that's why I write things down. What I'm getting at in terms of heart wisdom and gratitude is that when you experience gratitude and other forms of heart wisdom such as compassion, love, sympathy, what you're experiencing is the core understanding of the Buddha which he called dependent origination, and which I like to call interdependent transformation. So that teaching is pivotal. It's the intellectual expression of the reality that one experiences when one is in a state of gratitude. So the intellectual expression is to clarify that there is no such thing as a separately existing entity of any kind. Well, that's complicated, but what it means is that when you are experiencing gratitude, that's the reality of your existence. That's your actual condition. Your actual condition is that you are connected to everything. And you can understand why the Buddha felt that way when you experience gratitude. You can say, oh yeah, now I get it. It's not just a neat idea. It's also a neat experience. And so gratitude is the bridge from the cultivation of what are called the four immeasurables to the full blossoming of Bodichitta, which is practicing for the benefit of all sentient beings. So the four immeasurables are love, compassion, sympathy, and equanimity. Love, compassion, sympathy, and equanimity. So they're called the immeasurables because they are considered qualities of consciousness that are limitless in their true nature. They're also called Brahma Viharas, which means the homes of the gods. So that the idea is that the cultivation of these forms of awareness will take you to a celestial realm. So whether you think of it metaphorically, when you are experiencing, love, think of new love. It's the world is wonderful. Everything is wonderful. It's just great. So it's that sense of being in a celestial domain. When you're completely experiencing that. So at that, there's kind of three levels of heart wisdom. One level is the spontaneous arising of that sense of connectedness. So gratitude spontaneously arises. Love spontaneously arises. Within the Buddhist context, love means wanting others to be well and happy. Compassion spontaneously rises when you want others to be free from suffering. Sympathetic joy arises when you are happy at other people's success. And equanimity arises in this context when spontaneously you wish others to have peace of mind and serenity of heart. You want them to have that stability. All of those arise spontaneously in our consciousness. The function of a Buddhist teacher in this context is to get you to recognize those spontaneous experiences as more important than just a mood. They're not a passing mood, they're your true nature. And so that recognition is key, and then follows cultivation. So the system of the four immeasurables, and there are a number of systems, is to cultivate that awareness so that it becomes stabilized in a constant presence in one's mind and heart. Still, that awareness isn't necessarily experienced for the benefit of all sentient beings. How do you bridge those, go from the four immeasurables to the 4 or 5 bodhisattva vows? The way you do that is through the practice of gratitude and forgiveness. And gratitude is the most important of the two, because if you feel grateful for someone, even an enemy, then forgiveness spontaneously arises. As long as there is some person or something in existence, my big foible is poison oak. I always feel that Mother Nature could have done a better job in that ecological niche. So I have endless resentment against poison oaks. So I have to work on that, really. But so as long as there is something in one's consciousness that one cannot forgive, then there's a limitation, and the complete expansiveness of the bodhisattva mind and heart is not available. So the way you move from the practice of the four immeasurables to the full flowering of bodhicitta is through the cultivation of gratitude and forgiveness. That's why forgiveness rituals are so prominent in Buddhist practice, and also the cultivation of gratitude. Does that make sense? The levels I was talking about in Hubbard.
Between four immeasurables and gratitude being the bridge, could you maybe?
Just a couple minutes.
I'm not grateful for
Someone else like to sit in this.
So, when you cultivate immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, there can still be, certain constrictions on that. One of the things that happens when people practice the four immeasurables is that they run into those constrictions. I'll give a concrete example, beyond poison oak. I had a student who had a list of 4 people for whom she would not feel compassion and love towards. Everyone else, but not those 4. And she had, really good reasons. These constrictions can be overt, like that, like a list, like of people I'm going to exempt from this, or it can be very subtle, so the way to overcome those kinds of limitations when practicing the four immeasurables is by adding in the practice of gratitude and forgiveness. I'm not necessarily saying that they have to be done in sequence. That was just a way of presenting them. But so that gratitude and forgiveness feed into the practice of the four immeasurables, or the four immeasurables feeds into the practice of gratitude and forgiveness. And by when those become merged, then one can step into bodhisattva activity in heart and mind. Is that clear? Okay.
Thank you, Jim. It's always a delight.
You're welcome.
In regards to a poison oak, we'll take up a collection. We'll buy you a case of Technu.
All right.
Have you used that stuff?
No, I haven't used Technu, but when I go walking in the forest, I have a flamethrower. Just kidding. Acacia too. I have springtime allergies. So.
Speechless. This is a time for announcements. In the life of Sangha.
Well, the gay and lesbian, transgender, bisexual, and questioning now retreat at Spirit Rock is coming up. What are the dates? Do you know, probably?
June 6th to 11th.
June 6th to 11th.
Friday through Wednesday.
What is it?
Friday through Wednesday.
Friday through Wednesday. So it's basically a 5-day retreat, and it's a great opportunity to be with a really beautiful Sangha. For those of you who are ready for a 5-day retreat.
Is Eric and Arena meeting?
Eric and Arena together again for the first time. No.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess this is about the 10th or 11th year they've done it. So they're a gay and lesbian team that do this retreat. Oftentimes they bring in a third teacher.
came across a website. There's an organization in Massachusetts called Dharma Seed that has been archiving Dharma talks, mostly in the Theravada tradition for about the last 20 years. But now they have a website which has MP3s that you can listen to or download from the internet, and they're kind of now putting their talks online for free, and you can just go there, and there's some really, really delightful talks. I think I think it's called dharmastream.org, and it's just a great resource.
Thank you. Snake?
Oh, along the lines of fundraising, we got a letter from the community thrift store this week, and they're changing their rules. If in the past, unless we generated $200 a month in income for them, we didn't get, a proportion of it. Now they're raising, because of, everything, raising that minimum to $400. So I just like to encourage people to give to community thrift, and it can be impressively good as far as fundraising, because a couple of months ago, I remember we got a check for better than $900. I don't remember how long the period it covered, but whatever period, it's good.
George?
And a reminder that our talks are available on the internet at the GVF website, gaybuddhist.org.
Jim, we'd be honored if you would give us a blessing.
May all sentient existence be well and happy. May all sentient existence be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May good fortune fill all the days of all the lives of all sentient existence. May all sentient existence dwell forever in the limitless realm of the ever-present peaceful heart and serene mind. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.